Hello, and welcome to our discussion with Sheree Renée Thomas. I am Jason Sizemore, publisher and editor-in-chief of Apex Books and Apex Magazine, and I am delighted today to be speaking with Sheree Renée Thomas. Sheree is a fairly well-known editor-author in the genre. She currently is the editor-in-chief of fantasy and science fiction. She has guest edited an issue of Apex Magazine, issue 111, that was themed around, I think it was a signs of the horoscope, and she has appeared 4 times in the magazine. How are you, Sheree?
I'm good. I was looking for the issue. Here it is. This is the book version of it.
Yeah, it was Zodiac. Yes.
Zodiac. This is the cover art. Maybe you can see that. Of course, I also have this. I can't find my other issues, but I can find this one. This book, which I love. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right.
Do not go quietly. That was a great anthology.
Oh, you have that, Marie? Awesome. Yeah, I love this book. Put it right over there.
Apologies for my late arrival. I tried to sneak in lunch, and then I had technical issues. And
yeah, I had a huge brunch with my family. My in-laws are in town, and then I had itis. I was like, so I came in, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to sleep. And then I saw Rebecca. Yeah. Yeah, I don't have words of wisdom. I am what I am. I am who I am. If you have questions, I'm absolutely happy to talk about them. But I don't have like the, the 10 commandments of writing and editing and publishing.
Come on, I was waiting for you to come down off that mountain with the tablets.
It is what it is. I've had an interesting experience in the field coming from book publishing, but that was in a different era than we are in now. So there have been lots of great changes, which we're excited to see, and some things that haven't changed. But it is, that's the way humans are, right? That's how we are. So
yeah. So okay, dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How does it feel to be the editor-in-chief of one of the 3 remaining print short fiction genre publications?
Oh, it's been crazy. I was just saying, it's been. I have no doubt. I see why a person could burn out. Absolutely. On January 1st, we opened up the doors to submissions on Moksha, however you want to say it, and I was, opening up my New Year's champagne, and I looked on the portal, and I said, well, damn, this is going to be interesting, because when we interviewed for my daily and the other papers, I was told it would be about 1,200 submissions a month, and it was very clear on that first day that was going to be an underestimate. And so I can think after the first quarter, I decided to throttle submissions, because I just don't have, I'm not trying to burn out at all. And we publish 6 books a year. So there's 6 books a year, 260 pages or 258 pages of actual text. And that's 6 to a dozen stories, depending on the length, whether they're flash fiction and short stories, novelettes and novellas, right? And of course, all the wonderful nonfiction, the book columns and science columns and the film columns and all that good stuff, and some of the art. But the reality is, there's no way in the earth I'm going to be able to publish all the stories that I actually do like and love. And so I have to make very, very tough decisions on what I'm going to publish. And that's the hard part of deciding which ones you're going to let go, because you can't publish all those things. But the wonderful thing about our industry is that there are lots of other places like Apex or Uncanny or Fire Magazine or Strange Horizons and all the great places I love as a writer to contribute to. Uncanny, whatever, and also the places I love to read, that those stories can go. So I don't feel too bad, because I know that they're most likely going to find homes, or we're like I can find homes for some of the work. They'll find a home too somewhere along the way, and hopefully we'll be able to work together again in the future. But yeah, definitely put a throttle on that, which is not uncommon. But I was already prepared for whatever I do, that people are going to be, have something to say about it, which I find interesting, because some of the conversations I'm absolutely certain they didn't have with the previous editors. So it's just also creating boundaries for yourself as a Black woman editing a magazine that has been for 72 years, had its own legacy, and bringing my new vision and voice to it, and also just trying to have the kinds of stories that not only honor the magazine's history and its reputation as like the New Yorker of science fiction, and also the places where some of my favorite writers, either if they didn't have their first publication, their most significant early publications were in that. And I'm thinking of the Dark Tower of Flowers for Algernon. I mean, these kinds of stories, Ursula Le Guin, Elizabeth Hand, Samuel Delaney, just wonderful writers, but bringing in the new writers too, right? And having some other voices have a shot at building an audience and being in their dream publication, one of their dream publications, because people have several, and so I'm very fortunate in that the thing that I focus on is the thing that I love, which is the editing part of it. It's the working with the writers, the storytelling part of it. And I have a great team. At least one of the members, maybe a couple of them, have been around at Furman's time. And so they have a long vision on the magazine, and they've also contributed to it as writers as well. So it's just a great team. What has been challenging is joining this flagship publication right in the middle of political warfare, if you can say that, where our post office was sabotaged, if you're online, you don't have to worry about it so much, because people can just go float to your website and go read what they want to read, or get it, digitally emailed to them, which we do have, of course, obviously, digital subscriptions as well. But our main thing is the print. So if your USPS is not delivering it, consistently around the country, and I wait for my desk copy, so I kind of judge what's happening, in my neck of the woods here in Tennessee. A team is spread over the country on both coasts. Then I know that it's going to take a while to get some of these other places. So that was a challenge, kind of figuring out, okay, when are these books dropping, and then on top of that to have COVID, of course, affect us in other ways, in so many other ways, which was, like I was just talking with them about it, that was a bit sobering, and reminds you that this is not just an abstract thing that's happening, but it actually is affecting people's families and their businesses. So I was kind of dropped in the middle of all that. But yeah, one of the biggest questions I kept getting asked was, what are you going to do? What are you going to do for the magazine? What are you going to do? What's going to be different? Well, it's going to be different in the sense that you have an editor who, has a real, not that the other editors didn't, but I really, really love language, and I love the way that the story is told. The attention on the sentence level is important to me, not just the ideas and not just the themes that you're exploring, but how you say it. I'm a poet as well. So I'm publishing more poetry and publishing works that actually kind of, really kind of sing off the page for me. I really, really love horror. So there's more horror than perhaps there might have been before. because I just really love the genre as well. And but we've got all the traditional tropes, but you've got to come to me with something different, adding something of yourself to it. Can't just be another short sword woman with a short sword story. We've kind of been in that space for a while. It's not novel and new anymore. So even sometimes when people think that they're like, oh, I'm going to put women in this, or I'm going to put non-binary characters in this story. But if it doesn't really sing, if it's not a natural part of the whole storytelling, and you can kind of tell when it's just kind of plopped on like wardrobe, but not really like, the engine of the story, it doesn't hold well together, So I've just kind of been weeding those kinds of stories out. And the other thing that I had to do that was interesting was add on to the kind of reshape the guidelines, because there was things that were coming in the portal that I was just like, why are people still doing that in the year 2021, year of our Lord? Like, what is going on? Like, if your first paragraph, I'm in some woman's, I'm in her, her, up under her dress, as my grandmother would say, what makes you think that's a great opening to a story that's going to be read by a woman editor, by the way, let alone the whole audience? It's just like, so it's just like, it also stories that were, dealing with, had rape in the story, but it was dealt in a way where you could tell like they've never thought about what it means or its impact. It's being treated like it's like a plot device, and the characters who are supposed to be human people don't react to it in any kind of way that makes any sense at all. It's like, don't even send them to me. Just like leave those in your drawer or send them somewhere else. Overtly graphic stories, we don't usually publish overtly graphic stories where there isn't like anything else for us to get out of it. So it was just kind of like weeding out the strangeness, as I say, which you're very familiar with, I'm sure. Yeah. Oh, I can't hear you. Oh no, Jason. Let me see if it's something if you have it in the chat. Drop it in the chat for me. Yeah. But so that was just kind of reshaping it. I have some great readers, and that's another interesting thing. Gordon said he had worked maybe with one or two readers. And I know Charlie worked with maybe a couple as well, but not that many. He might have started off with a lot, but that's a whole nother thing to manage readers, because you have to weed out the people who are excited initially. Yeah, I want to read, or but they don't realize the volume of work. And I mean, baby, if you're reading 1 or 2 stories a week, you're not doing jiggity jack for us. When we're getting 15.
Can I ask how many slush readers do you have?
Right now, I have maybe 9 actual real ones, I'll say, who are reading regularly. And everybody's busy. Some of them are writers. Some of them are editors, too. They've got other careers and everything going on. But, you got to get in and move through the stories. Else I'm just, what do I need you for? Just to be quite frank. Yeah, we're going through quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Quite a bit of stories. And I do kind of keep an informal list of people I hope to see, something else from, even if we can't work together on that particular story they sent, because writers have so many different ways of telling stories, so many different things that they want to tell. And sometimes stories can be very, very close. And every now and then I'll go on my social media or Twitter, and I might share something just informally and like, hey, no more AI stories. We're beyond in the AI, and I'm bored with them now. I feel like I've seen every incarnation that you could think of, and that's just how it is in our genre, right? So you just have to, like, if you're going to go through like the tried and true, theme, then you better come with something very original and interesting, or moving, or funny, which is very hard to find, like good humorous stories.
Yeah.
Bring on something special to make it stand out. Otherwise, we're just, you kind of get overly familiar with with it, and it's no fun because there's supposed to be this sense of discovery, right? When you read it, and if you're doing everything that we've already seen before, there's that. Other thing I ask people to do, and that's why I can really tell if people are actually reading some of the guidelines or not. I don't really want a summary of your short story in the cover letter. You know, I know that's helpful if you're doing a novel and you're trying to get an agent or someone to ask for the whole thing, right? And you give them a hook or a good lead or whatever. But most of us don't read the cover letters first. We read the story first, and then we go back and read the cover letter.
Yeah, I never read the cover letter first.
I mean, it's important, but it's not important for the initial reading. What's important for the initial reading is what you wrote. It's your story. It's the opening. The first page is the important thing. The first paragraph is the important thing for your for the reading. And then if I'm able to get through the entire story, which is not common, I will say I don't read all the stories. Yeah. Absolutely not. You've been editing since the 90s. I don't need to read the whole thing to see if I like it or not, or if I want to read it. Because if I don't want to read it in the beginning, it's not likely that our audience is going to either. But if I'm able to make it through the whole story, and I'm very curious, and I go back and see who sent me the story, because I'm not necessarily going to remember in reading it, and go from there. But I don't think you need to give like my story is about a unicorn that's doing this, that, and the other, because sometimes our descriptions are higher than what the actual story delivers. So you don't want to raise any expectations. Or sometimes we get other completely different things, because when you're reading, you bring your whole self to the story, right? Once the creator has made that story, they've brought themselves to the page, and then they release it to us, and then your readers bring all who they are and their questions and things to it, and we may see things that you weren't even maybe aware that you had done in your story. That's kind of cool, and I just like that sense of discovery and finding that out for myself without you telling me. And also, I think it keeps, for people who do, because some of my readers do read the cover letters first, but most of us do not. It keeps them from having any preconceived notion about your story when they get it. Because what if they don't like Westerns? What if they don't like alternate histories? Or what if they're not really the most enthusiastic about off-Earth stories, right? Then they've already coming in with a kind of like, no. And you don't want them to come in with that approach. You want them to come in like, ooh, tell me a story, and let me see where you take me kind of approach to it. So yeah, just, if you have publishing credentials, that's cool. If you don't, that's okay too. Sometimes people will write letters, say, this is my first story, or I've been, writing for this long, but I haven't, broken a professional market yet, or I've been published here, or I have a whole nother career, and this was always my dream, and that's fine. Like, I'm having the opportunity to publish a NASA engineer, which I will just say, just for your ears only. Sometimes when I go back, you go back and you're like, oh, this person, has this other kind of career. You're like, yeah, because having a strong technical background does not always translate to being a great short fiction writer. Sometimes having all that information and having it kind of front loaded in the story and not in a natural, organic way, makes it very difficult to move through it and be engaged. And you can kind of tell, oh Lord, it's a doctor. Oh no.
Yeah. It's been my experience that if the writer is a mathematician,
oh, no. Yeah.
They're very precise and very picky on like edits and how the story is presented, like way beyond normal.
Yeah. You want to have a good storytelling flow. It's not just what's in it, but how you present it, and do I care about it? Am I, as a reader, invested in what's happening to these characters? So there's that. But yeah, it's been very, very interesting. Doing it. And the main thing, I'm just like, I don't really want to get any letters from you. If I passed on your story, I don't want to hear a thank you letter. You just cluttered my inbox. Like, why are you thanking me? I'm not going to remember your name. It doesn't add any cool points to your, like, whatever you think is going on. It's just not how it works. It just means that oh, I thought I needed to do something to help you or something, I thought there was something that actually relates to my actual life. And really it's just a thank you for passing on my story. You don't got to do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. Just keep it moving and come back harder, come back stronger, come back with another story that you love writing. And, let's see if we can work together. Yeah.
Some great advice from the mountaintop here.
from under the mountain. Like I'm looking for precious, but yeah.
I kind of feel like sometimes when writers are trying to make a synopsis of their short story submission, that they're trying to cover for what they may perceive as shortcomings in the work. And that's kind of one reason I kind of discourage it, other than it not helping me at all, when I read it. Just let the work speak for itself,
Yeah. I think it's just fine. They don't have to worry about that. They might want to do that for other types of writing, screenplays and things like that. But or for the short story, we don't have to have the description, because we're going to read it and hopefully enjoy it. Hopefully make it all the way through.
Do you get a lot of pushback from writers in the form of disappointment when you share with them the fact that editors don't always read the entire story?
Not really. I mean, most of I would have to say I have a sense. I don't really know. Most of these people who are submitting have been submitting before. They've been submitting to other markets, and they have. If they don't have a community that's in person with them, they have a community perhaps online where they can discuss things. Not mostly that. Sorry, I'm having my little screen kind of disappeared. The only thing I would say I've gotten a little pushback is they don't get they feel like they are old feedback, and I'm like, please, just to be quite frank, no, you're not old feedback. This is not a writing workshop. I'm not your writing coach. I'm not in your writing circle. This is not a Codex or whatever other board you're on. Go find your community there. This is a publishing market, one of the higher publishing markets, and you need to come correct. If the editor wants to give you feedback and they feel like it will be useful, because sometimes I could have feedback for you, but it wouldn't necessarily be useful to you, if that's any sense. It's not going to necessarily help you with that particular story. So the feedback I give, when I give it, it's something that I think that might help them with that particular story that they've shared with me, that might help them either revise it or get it publishable or more publishable perhaps for another market. And those are very specific things. But if in general, if you're like a super beginner, there's not a lot I can say to you, because you just got to keep writing. You've got to just keep reading and writing, right? And all of this is subjective, and they don't like to hear that sometimes, but it absolutely is. Like something that's completely uninteresting and boring to me might rock the world somewhere else, I don't know. And it's not, I don't think it's a good use for my time, and it's not useful to another writer to hear that their story wasn't interesting necessarily, or that it was boring. Like, who's going to say that? So no, you're not going to get that feedback necessarily, but you could get feedback on a story that was really close or almost there, where you're like, hey, this is a really great premise, or your world building was very interesting, but the execution of it, or you have two storylines that didn't really quite connect by the end of the story, or you have a character that's really just a sketch, and we don't really have enough interior on this person to be invested in what happens to them to keep reading until the end. Like, that kind of stuff might be useful to them. I don't know if it's useful to tell someone who's in the beginning of their writing journey, you're using too many adverbs, because that can be kind of, you know what I mean? And also, I don't know these writers. I don't know who they are. Most of them, I have never worked before with them. So they don't have anything I can have read. I don't know if they're able to do revisions. I don't know what things, I don't know what the kinds of things are important for them as writers. You understand what I'm saying? That can inform how you edit and work with a writer. You know what I mean? Like if I have if you have a writer who's very, very invested in certain types of characters and the way that they develop those characters, then I know when I get a story from them, there's certain things that they're trying to achieve, and so I work around that or what have you, or I have that in mind when I ask them for revisions, or what have you. But for the most part, they're a blank slate. I don't have any working connection with them.
Mm-hmm.
So when I do ask for a revision, it's a hope. It's a hope that they might be able to do it. I'm really, really hoping that they will be able to do it. And I also am hoping that the revision request that I ask isn't too much, that it's just a few, like maybe one thread line that they can work deeper through the storytelling. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they can make that ending land a little more solid, have more emotional resonance for us, because they have all the pieces are there. They just haven't, connected it well enough in the end. Or if there's one question that doesn't quite work with the premise, and if they can address that, and then the story is fine.
Yeah.
Those are the kinds of revision letters you can do, but not anything that's going to hopefully not make the story be more than what it is, than what they intended. You know what I mean? And that's really tough with like the flash fiction stuff, because like, for example, recently I got a poem that had a really wonderful premise, but they introduced an ideal, but they didn't explore it. They introduced an ideal, but they didn't offer any insight on it. They didn't offer an opinion, and it's a very controversial topic. So you would have an opinion, one way or the other, but there isn't any expression of it, and it's in the poem, and it's in a short poem. So I was like, this is something interesting premise, but it doesn't really take us anywhere, And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking this would have been a great short story to write, But this, it's a poet, so I don't know what they want to do. That is that useful feedback for them necessarily, or would that be offensive to them? You know what I mean? We don't
Possibly.
know. We don't know. So it's sometimes just easier to just keep it moving and let the writer, carry on with their journey.
Mm-hmm. So you're also, a very astoundingly great writer, and you just recently had a collection out, Non-Barred Blues, which is gorgeous. How are you handling the transition from doing more writing projects, and now you have this very one of the top of the field editorial positions? I imagine that balance is probably tough to deal with.
It's tough. I talked with Charlie about that, and some other good friends of mine before that, about how they're doing, because one of the reasons that Charlie said he was stepping down was because he had his own writing. Mm-hmm. He wanted to dive back in. He was a very prolific writer. He's been published in the magazine FNSF and other places many, many times. But he and his partner, his wife, they're very very busy writers, and so they're working on something, hopefully, that he'll probably be able to announce soon or what have you. But he talked a little bit about his process and how he does it. And for me, I realized that the best thing for me is, if I'm going to get my writing done, I need to do it before I do anything on the magazine. I need to do it early, so that I know that I had that time for myself, and then it's kind of percolating in my mind, the way I did when I had my children. When I had my youngest, for sure, I had to be mom most of the most of the day. So that means the other time I had to dive in, get my writing done, and then spend the whole day pre-writing in my head or what have you. So that when I got back to it, I was very efficient about being able to go and immediately pick up where I stopped, or edit, or whatever it is that I needed to do. It's interesting because I've had some very interesting projects that I've had to deliver before, quicker than probably anything I've ever had to do in my career that I'm aware of. And I wasn't sure if I could do it. So I was like, I don't think I can do all this bullshit. And And of course, I did. In fact, I'm really excited. I wrote a whole novelette for the Black Panther
Yeah. Isn't that
anthology
incredible?
in like record time, I might say. And it went through 4 editors. And in terms of approval, because you can't really introduce new things and stuff without it being vetted and stuff. And it was a nerve-wracking but awesome experience. I had a lot of fun working on. We did a panel talking about license to write. I think that was on Friday. And so I was like, okay, I can do some things more, in a different way than I'm accustomed to doing it. So that was a good milestone thing. And I just finished another project, which I cannot wait for it to be announced. But that was insane too. So I just said, okay, this is the time of the insane things that I didn't think that I could do, that wasn't really initially on the bucket list, as you can say, because you have our little bingo list of, yay, I would like to do this, or I'd like to be nominated for that, or I'd like to do this, or have this experience. And you're like, yay, that would be great. I'm moving forward in my dreams, but there's some stuff you just are outside of your vision. So I like that ability of life to positively surprise you.
Yes. You're calling it positive. Okay.
Yes, the positive surprises. That's what we want. But yeah, so that's been cool, and I suspect, because I'm on my right now, I'm into the summer. I'm in the summer 22 issue, working on that now. And I guess that's the other thing, having to exist in the future but be in the present. Like, because like, what kind of world will it be next summer? Yeah. What can I say in this editorial letter? Because I have no idea, because I could not have predicted this year, the previous year, and so on and so forth. So it's like, this is going to be interesting. But what are the challenges for me? I mean, I think I'm getting the writing, getting my project stuff done, because I need that. I need to be able to write. I'm a writer first. I'm a very communal person, which most people, that most people are not editors, right? Because editing is hard. Editing is a pain in the ass, right? Sometimes it's thankless, rewardless work. Sometimes, right? It can be. I mean, let's just be real. And most people just want to be like, yay, read my story, get their contributor's copy and stick it on the shelf. Add it to the CV, add it to the resume, and keep going to the next thing. Whereas an editor, you're constantly reaching back and reaching to the side and reaching ahead and carrying everybody and trying to be the trumpeter for everyone and celebrate their successes and do all the things and pay attention to the details that they don't pay attention to. You know what I mean? And create the space, because once they've created the wonderful writing, you want to be able to create the space and build the community where it can be read and enjoyed and celebrated and actually have an impact on the world. That's the fun part of the editing process. What I really have been enjoying, besides just the moment of reading something in the portal and going, woo, I like this. Oh, and I add all my little tags, considering or read this again in 2 weeks. Because I mean, I don't know what other people can do. I'm only me. I'm human. You just got to deal with that. I can be excited about something in the moment, but I want to make sure that if I read it in a week or two, that what I thought I read is what I read. So it's very rare that I'm just going to read it one time and be like, accept, send money, contract.
That doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often. So I just want to make sure, and also that I'm still in love with it when I get the other 5 stories that I like, right? Out of the 500, or whatever. And then it's going to hold up well, with whatever veterans that we're publishing. And this is what I was talking about with the anxiety I had initially over the first Dark Matter volume. I was very conscious that I was going to have these major writers in this book, along with writers that no one had ever heard of. And you have to be aware that when you place an unknown writer in a collection with veterans that you've told the readers and the other writers, this work is wonderful. It's as good and as wonderful as this writer. It's as worthy of your time and attention and your short lifespan on the planet to read this story too, right? And you want to make sure that you're honoring that writer, because that's putting a lot of weight on the unknown writer as well, and you're honoring all the other writers as well. And I was thinking about it. There's a writer, Honoré Fanon Jeffers, whose book, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, has just taken on the world by storm. It's picked up by the Oprah, and it's on NPR, and it's everywhere you can think of. And I published her very first short story, almost 22 years ago, in Dark Matter. Unknown writer to most of the world. Not unknown to me because I knew her as a poet. But it was a really great story. I saw the potential in it. I felt very strongly about it, and I made it my anchor story, right along with a W.E.B. Du Bois story, which they didn't even discuss him as a science fiction writer, partially because of genre snobbery, but that's a whole nother panel, a whole nother conversation. Now everybody knows W.E.B. Du Bois writes science fiction, but when I did this in 1998, they absolutely did not. And I put those works together, and she has moved on to have an amazing career. I've got Pulitzer Prize winner in that volume, National Book Award finalist in the second volume, Lifetime Achievement Award winners from the Bram Stoker in the volume. I mean, the people who were not well known then, and they have gone on. Other writers who have been publishing but not not widely known are now doing some of the most exciting stuff in the field. That came from me sticking with my instincts about the stories that impact me, that have a visceral effect on me, and I feel will have that type of impact on readers, whether you know their name or not. And you have to have faith in that and be willing to do all that labor we talked about, what it means to be an editor, to help support that. So the exciting thing for me is finding those good stories that I really, really love in there, and sending them their acceptance letters. And then when they get their contracts or their checks, which Gordon loves to, he types them up on the letterhead. They get like the old fashioned letter, not just, they don't get just my email. They get the actual thing and types up on letterhead. And some people frame it. I think that's wonderful. They get their payment, and then when they tell their families and their community in public. That's one of my favorite times, because I see that joy and that excitement and that, I really, I made it to my dream market, or I made it to this market. And that makes all the hard times when you're not reading such good stuff, or when people are pissy to you, or they must think I'm the help. I don't know why they would think that, but they think I'm the help, but I have to gather them together, gather them into themselves gently. Because occasionally they're in my box with that foolishness, and I'm just like, oh, you must have me confused.
Wow.
I mean, this is a market you want to be publishing in, and you want to piss off the editor. I think that's not a great move. But I love that, and I love when they get their proofs. I love the proofs.
They see their work for the first time.
As a writer, I love to receive the proof. You know that. I'm like, yee! Or I love the copy edits, because then you got like person that's looking at it with questions, like, oh yeah, that was cool. Oh, thank you, great. Oh, you saved my life. You saved my life with this line here. Whatever. We should have like God bless the copy editor day. And but I think I love the proof stage, because that's when it's in the magazine's design, and Jerry does this amazing, Nina and Jerry do this beautiful work, and it just looks so great, and it feels real. And whether it's scheduled for the next 3 months or within the next year, it's coming. You know what I mean? But they don't know who they're going to be published with, and I love that essence. So that my other favorite time is when the actual issue is put together, and that the whole lineup is there, and when they discover the other stories, and I love that too. So yeah.
I may have to change how I do that. We make a big production of the table of contents a couple weeks prior to the release.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe surprising people might be a more interesting way to go.
Yeah, I don't know. I just enjoy it. I just think it's kind of cool because sometimes people, they know the other writers and sometimes they don't, and they're like, oh my gosh, So that's kind of cool. Let me see. I got a question from Marissa.
Yeah.
Has editing and the heavy slush reading at F? I think I talked about it a little bit. Editing has always made me very keenly aware of what I like in stories and what I don't for myself. But it's also, I think, made me a little, and I think this is probably for all editors who are also writers, because not all editors are also writers, but all editors who are also writers, we know what it feels like to get editorial letters and to get revision requests and things like that. So you're thoughtful about what you ask other writers to do. And I try not to ask writers to do anything that I wouldn't be willing to consider in my own writing. Like, I'm not going to have you do some crazy dramatic thing that I would be insulted by or wouldn't be willing to do. I'm going to, try to be thoughtful about that. And also, I just trust that the writer often has the answers already in their heart and their spirit and their mind about how to answer a certain question. It's just that they might have taken it out in one revision of it on their own that we never saw, or it's in an earlier draft, or they thought about it, but they thought they can get away with it. Like, I thought I knew I should have done that, but I thought maybe it might work this way. But if you just ask the right questions, 99.9% of the time, they're going to know exactly, the direction to go or what have you, and then we take it to the next level with our copy editors who's like, well, in Iceland, in the 1400s of such and such, and they bring out the heavy guns, I call it. And then it makes it even more precise. And then you see all the synchronicity too, because even if they didn't have it exactly right, they got the essence of it, the spirit of it. And that's really cool to see as well. In it, but it just helps me, I think, be a little more thoughtful about what I ask writers to do and how I ask them, and also to know that a rejection isn't personal. Most of the time, it's not a personal thing. As writers, we have to be able to accept that our stories are not always going to land the way we hope they will with every editor, and they might not always make it in every publication or a particular issue we would love for them to be in, but it's not about you particularly. It's about that particular story in communication or in conversation with other stories that we haven't seen, that the editor has, and if it's something that's quite frankly like, oh, I'm sorry, I just acquired 4 other consciousness transfer stories, and I'm just kind of like, I feel like I've done a lot of those.
Yeah, I'm good with those.
Yeah, I will let a writer know that so they can know that, hey, it's not even this particular story. It's just this is the pattern, this is the rhythm that's happened, and this is what you've been through. So you may have a wonderful opportunity to place it somewhere else, because it is a good it's a good story. And I try to when I let people know when something is a good story, or I love certain things about the story, but it's not right for me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, do we have any other questions from the table? Now's the time. Okay, I get to ask one of mine then. So, I imagine it seemed like when you were announced as the editor-in-chief, there was universal internet praise and hallelujahs and a chorus of like, hey, that's awesome. I imagine that felt good, but did it also scare you a little bit? Like, oh my gosh, there's going to be so many people watching what I'm, how I'm going to make F&SF mine.
Oh, okay. So what I had mixed feelings about it, because Let's see how frank I want to be. I have mixed feelings about it. There's a thing that's called a glass cliff, I think, that I've just found out that was the term, but it's something I've been kind of aware of. And so at first I was like, what does this mean? Because I'm cynical sometimes. I'm a cynical person. Since I've been on the earth, apparently, according to my parents. But my thing is, okay, what's the catch? What's up? You about to die? What's going on? Because sometimes, when people come in like, oh, let's go bring in this person, it's some bullshit that's happened. It's some, shit in the game. The stuff is about to go belly up or whatever is happening. So I'm like, what's up with the what's ups? Give me the straight dope, and everything, and I'm like, okay, everything is cool except we're in the middle of a pandemic. Except we're in the middle of this crazy political situation or whatever. But that did occur to me. Because I've seen other places, former places, where I work, where they announce a person after they've had trauma. Let's put it like that. And then this person is not only walking into a non-traditional position where they are non-traditionally expected to be at, but now they're being walked in the middle of a fire. So that was the question I had. The other thing, I just said, well, this is going to be interesting to a lot of different writers who have not accustomed to being told no from someone like me, right? They had and they never even considered that someone like me, whatever you want to apply to that, would be reading their work, So I'm asking other questions, so you can't just throw in an indigenous person in the middle of the story and think that's going to fly, because that seems to be a trend now, and thanks to the wonderful work that Apex is doing with the great special volume, and the work that Strange Horizons and others are bringing in other communities and putting a spotlight on those writers' works. It has to ring true. It has to have the heart and the care in it. You've got to do your due diligence. You have other great resources, Writing the Other, and all these other places that you can go to try to get some beta readers and get some support on that. But there's certain stuff is not going to fly well with me. And we already talked about that. So I'm just like, oh, that's gonna create some ripples. So even when I put the throttle, which other publications have a throttle, you know what I mean? You can't send 50 stories with 10 different emails or whatever, because one, we're tracking it, we know, and certain stuff it becomes very clear who it is, and I guess they weren't used to being told, I don't know. No, I don't know what it is. But so I was expecting to have some pushback, like some Obama pushback, like, oh God, the first Black president, or whatever, that kind of thing. So I was bracing myself because I'm a pretty blunt, straightforward person. So I'm gonna get at you if you get at me with some silliness. But I found that I didn't have to, because other people, wonderful, amazing writers and people, were gathering the folks up themselves. So I didn't really even have to do that much, other than just do my work. So
yeah.
The other thing I found was interesting. This was some of the interviews that I received, the questions, and I was just like, because I went back and looked at the interviews from the previous editor. And stuff. And I said, oh, I'm getting different kind of questions. That's okay. It's a different time. It's like 6-year difference. Let's see what's up. And I'm like, well, they were talking to me as if I have not been a part of this community. They were talking to me as if I just walked in off the sidewalk and say, hey, I'm going to edit F and SF, as if I had not been in science fiction and fantasy community all these years, as if they didn't know anything about me, as if my family were not big science fiction, fantasy, and horror fans. So it was just, so I had to kind of shift those kind of conversations. Well, what are you going to do? We're going to publish science fiction and fantasy and horror and poetry. That's what we're going to do with the magazine. I'm hoping to have, continue the work of new voices and people from around the world. And I'm at this point, I'm kind of accustomed to things having to change when I show up or when we show up. We had to do that with Dark Matter. Things had to change, and we're still seeing the ripples of changes and all the other great innovations that are coming from other people that are adding to the field. Just finished another big project, and people had to figure out how to pay people in the continent of Africa who are not a part of the diaspora, who are not in the UK, who are not in Canada, who are not in the United States and the Caribbean, but who are literally writing from their homes in a nation that's on the continent of Africa, to find out that there weren't any really financial systems set up for that. Even from our biggest publishers, that was astonishing to me. And we're still trying to figure out how to navigate that. So it's like, you can tell that that the changes are very new because they don't even have ways to pay people. You know, they don't have tax covenants. They don't have, all these things set up. Sometimes it's the nation themselves have some complications, but it hasn't been worked out before, is my point. So I know that we're doing new things because we're having to solve new problems in real time. So
it saddens me to hear that you had to deal with so much willful naivety, because for a genre that is so into its own history, and for them to act like they may have never heard of dark matter. I've heard of that anthology since I was early 2000s when I first got into sci-fi. I often hear it quoted as, one of the top 3 or 4 anthologies ever in the genre, and
that's an honor. Yeah, I just think that even when we're sitting at the table, we're still sometimes considered as the exception to the table. Like, even if you're right there with you, we're in our hobbit hats or whatever, with our robes and stuff too. You're still considered out, and that's why all these great groups like the Carl Brandon Society and these other groups have been so important, because they're adding visibility to people who have pretty much have always been there. They might not have been able to afford to be at the conventions and everything, but like when we were buying all the Stephen King's books, that was still actual U.S. currency that was going into his bottom line, on his royalties or what have you. It just didn't have our names on it, but we were part of that community. So there's that. But there are other communities that I am trying to learn more about and embrace, and also rise to the occasion to figure out how to publish them well and to publish them honorably as well, and to give traction to that. I remember I got an email from somebody, from a very subscriber. We have these great people who've been subscribing since they for 40, 50 years, since they were teens or younger, or their third generation subscribers, that kind of thing. And he said, "Oh, in the May-June issue, you have a," what did he say? He said you have a, or maybe no, it was the July issue. He's like, in the July-August issue, you have a story with 2 homosexuals as leads, and another story that has a lesbian." And he was like, is this a thing that's going to be happening? I was like, is this a thing that's going to be happening after 70 years of publishing? You're complaining about 2 stories that you read? Dude, get out my box. I was like, go away. I don't have time for that. Like, but then also trying to do like a disclaimer about, oh, but I'm not really, I'm not a bigot, or I'm not, I'm not. But you sat down and wrote a whole letter. To let me add how many straight couples have been published. Stories about straight couples or people in the 72-year history. Let us not be silly. But so there's a recognizable shift. I think our May-June issue had the most people of color in the history of the magazine in a single issue. In the masthead. And I don't even know if people notice it or not, but that's my point. Like, you read the stories. You
want to get to a point where people don't notice.
Here we are. We're here and they've been here. But I've got a range of readers, and we're just out here looking for great stories. You have some fun conversations about some of them. People have some amazing imaginations. Things that you could never think of, they have thought of it, and it's just like, wow. And that makes it fun.
See, editing is fun.
editing is fun. It's fun.
You just
I don't
admitted
know about publishing, but editing is fun. The
it. Yeah.
publishing part is, I don't know about all that, but the editing part is fun. I'm glad Gordon does all of the, like I think we think of him as the chief bottle washer. He does all that stuff, all the dealing with the vendors, dealing with the distributors, dealing with the payments, dealing with the contracts, dealing with all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The brick and mortar stuff, and I get to be the artist, and deal with the lines and the production. So that's a lot. It's a lot of work, though. It is a lot.
Well, thank you so much for spending time with me. You're one of my favorite people alive.
Oh, thank you. I love Apex. I love Apex. I was like, where? I know I have my magazines because I have them all like stacked up. I want to know, but I could only find my books, so I got to go find the magazines. But yeah.
I hope that you continue to have time to write and send us a scrap every now and then.
I'm so happy when you published Barefoot at Midnight. I was like, yay! That was one of those stories. Sometimes you write a story and you're like, there's nowhere to publish this. There's nowhere to publish this. And it was a story I wrote in the middle of the pandemic. I was pissed in the middle of the George Floyd stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I live like a few blocks from where some of the history in that story actually took place. Like, there's a sign. And I thought, no one's going to want to read this story. No one's going to want to publish it. But I'm so glad it did fine, and that you and Maurice really loved it. And,
oh my God, yeah. He challenged me. He's like, if you can read the first paragraph of this and not send an acceptance letter, I would be amazed. And I'm cynical to a degree as well, so I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. And sure enough, that first paragraph. So good.
Thank you. Came straight from the spirit, because I was like, I can't watch the news anymore. I can't watch the news anymore. I can't do it. But yeah, I mean that's the joy, the fun thing about writing. You can tackle tough things and make it a little bit more manageable for you on the page. That's why I love horror too, because it gives you a safe space to contemplate the monsters in ourselves and the monsters around us. We need that for our sanity sometimes. But yeah. So I'm hoping to be a space where people can send me this story that they don't think anyone's going to get or anyone's going to care for, but the one that they had to write. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to, work together and I can send it out. I cannot wait for you all to, I hope you get a chance to read the new issue September, October, and the November, December, the one we're ending the year with. Yay! I cannot wait for that.
I love the enthusiasm. I totally get where you're coming from.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Bye.
Because I totally had the itis. Never go to brunch before a booth. Thank you.